Hello, I am back again talking about Canadian politics. One of the most frequent comments that I got was, okay, how does the US election impact us? Unfortunately, there is most likely going to be a huge impact on us as Canadians.
Oh, Lord. Again.
So I want to talk about everything from the economy to our trade and how we're seeing a more conservative shift in Canada altogether. First and foremost, let's get it out of the way, the economy. Objectively speaking, Trump's plan could be a huge mess for us in Canada. For one, he's talked about putting a 10% tariff on all US imports, which will make literally everything more expensive for us.
You want to impose a 10% tariff on all goods coming into the U.S.
It's just going to cost countries that have been ripping us off for years. It's going to just force them to pay us a lot of money, reduce our deficit tremendously, and give us a lot of power for other things.
For those who don't know, a tariff is a tax added to imports, things coming into the country to make them more expensive. It's theoretically done to encourage people to buy more local goods, but for us who buy a lot of things from the US, especially considering that the US is our #1 trade partner, we're cooked. Why does that matter to us as Canadians? Because higher prices, or inflation as we know it, could mean that their Federal Reserve or their central bank would be less likely to lower interest rates. So if the US keeps their rates steady or even just increases them a little bit, this is going to impact Canadians who have loans, credit, or mortgages. Rising rates means that borrowing money becomes more expensive. Yay! Who's ready for their mortgage to increase? And then on top of that, if the Canadian dollar falls in comparison to the US dollar, we would be paying even more money for imported goods like food or electronics. So all of this results in something called the ripple effect. And as a result, Canadians are going to feel their wallets getting yanked. Like, it is going to get so much more expensive for us if he decides to introduce that 10% tariff on all imports. Unfortunately, it's not just the economy that we need to worry about. Trump's win is most likely going to shake up things here socially and politically in Canada. We see a lot of people talking about how Pierre is going to be the solution to all our problems.
Hey, hold on, this shit ain't funny. It ain't funny, but it is.
As he is the leader of the Conservative Party. And I'm like, wow, this is a very unfortunate turn of events. While freedom of speech allows people to criticize the government, it's very shocking how aggressive and mainstream this rhetoric has become. Online and even in person, we're seeing this rising rhetoric of just being anti-immigration or anti-minority.
I think there are too many immigrants coming into Canada currently.
Half of all Canadians now say that there are too many immigrants in Canada.
You see? This is why I'm so sick and tired of all these Indians. Fam, all the paint. No. You know how there's like 9 of them in an apartment? Bro.
People are openly blaming immigrants and people of color for taking their jobs or draining resources, echoing the same fear-based messages that we see in the US. But the reality is, Canada has a long history of relying on immigration to fill in the gaps in our workforce, as well as boost our economy and keep our economy strong. But this shift in public opinion shows how deeply these ideas are starting to influence Canadian views. And you know what? It's not just immigrants or people of color that are facing this backlash. There's also this growing resistance to issues that the left has traditionally supported, like gender equality and women's rights. We are seeing anti-women sentiments become way more open than before.
But we know that 100% of Conservative MPs voted against contraception, free contraception for women. You're against a woman's right to choose and have autonomy over her own body.
With people actively saying that gender equality initiatives are unnecessary, a waste of funding, or are holding men back. Some of these views are spilling over from similar conservative trends from the US, where we've seen backlash against what critics would call woke policies. And I honestly think right-wing politicians like Pierre have been able to tap into this frustration. Pierre and his team often focus on issues that directly affect people's wallets, like inflation or the fact that his slogan is "Axe the Tax" and cost of living, which resonate strongly in tough economic times. If people can't even go out to afford their groceries and you have a political candidate saying, "I'm going to do all that it takes to make sure that you can afford your groceries and you can buy a home and you can do this and that," obviously it's going to resonate to someone who can't do those things right now. And as a result, they can very easily start to shift towards that right-wing propaganda.
Shouldn't our working class be better off today than it was 40 years ago? The system is broken. It protects the privileged.
We don't need elites. Elites.
There's just one hitch. Pierre Poilievre has spent his entire political career serving the very elites he vilifies.
Some members of his party are actively pushing to roll back progressive policies that we have in Canada. And I genuinely believe that social media has really amplified this anger and frustration that a lot of people have towards different groups in this country. Media personalities and even everyday Canadians spreading misinformation or just exaggerating fears, often blaming outsiders or left-wing policies for the problems that they are facing, for issues that are much more complex than that.
Yeah, dude who's been doing this for 32 years. #1 clown, 9 straight years.
And I honestly think because of this and because of what's been happening in the US, it has directly impacted Canadians, and Canada's political landscape as a whole has become way more divided. The cost of living is insanely high, housing prices are out of control, and people are feeling squeezed financially. But instead of looking at the wider causes of these problems, many people are just finding an easy target in immigrants or the liberal government or this and that. There's way more layers to this. And this directly mirrors Trump's impact on the US, where people were drawn towards those populist ideas. Populism, by the way, is a type of approach that claims to represent the common people against the elite. So they'll say things like, you know what, we're going to cut the taxes, we're going to make life more affordable for you, and then as soon as they get power, all that money goes right to their besties that are already billionaires, and it goes towards private interest, and it goes towards wealthy lobbyists. And then you're wondering, okay, so you said that you were going to help us. Why is bread $20? That is exactly how populism works. And it always gets people, it always makes them feel like, you know what, I think they're going to help the economy. And then they never do. Overall, we're in a time when Canadians are becoming increasingly polarized and right-wing populism is gaining ground. The louder and more aggressive anti-liberal and anti-minority rhetoric we're seeing is very much a part of that. If this continues, we will see Canada's political landscape be just as divided as the US is, with more hostility towards minority groups, immigrants, and progressive policies that would benefit all of us. All right, so now let's talk about trade. About 75% of Canada's exports go to the US. And as I said before, Trump's 10% tariff idea could make it more expensive for American businesses to buy our stuff. This could really hit Canada's economy. Economists have estimated that if Trump's tariffs goes through, Canada could see a drop of $7 billion in GDP loss. GDP stands for the gross domestic product, or the total value of goods and services that Canada produces. That's a big chunk of our economy at risk. So this type of trade shock could only make things more difficult for us. And then on top of that, in 2026, we are set to renegotiate our big trade deal with the US and Mexico. So we used to have NAFTA, so now we have USMCA, which is the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement. This deal allows goods and services to move easily between these countries with fewer restrictions, making trade cheaper and more efficient for all three countries. However, what a lot of Canadian economists are worried about is that Trump could push for harsher terms for Canada in the next negotiations, meaning our negotiators will need to be on the ball to make sure that they protect our interests. All right, so next up we have the shifting media landscape and the social media influence. So this is kind of similar to what I was saying in part 2, where the political landscape in Canada is already starting to shift towards the right wing. But this just ties into the further media and misinformation that we're seeing right now in Canada. With Bill C-11, the Canadian government tried to limit the American-owned media dominance that we see. However, Obviously, there are a lot of criticisms of this bill as well, because again, this goal was meant to regulate online content and to just make sure that Canadian content is more visible to us. But the problem is that as a result, we're not seeing Canadian news content at all on social media, especially on Instagram. So for example, platforms like Facebook have stopped showing Canadian news altogether. So we're not seeing that on Facebook or Instagram. This has left a gap where garbage pages like 6buzz are able to absolutely thrive and spread misinformation and just get people riled up, despite the fact that a lot of the stuff they post is not even rooted in truth.
It was all a lie. Guys, it was all a lie.
Did you know that TikTok is now banned in Canada? Thoughts? And it's like, this is how you spread misinformation. And it doesn't help that now we can't really access different news pages on Facebook and Instagram. Now we have more Canadians consuming information that is just not reliable or just not being verified, which only leads to the spread of Trump-style populist ideas. Even if they're not based in facts, it's still spreading like wildfire. This shift makes it easier for Canadian politics to be swayed by sensationalist or misleading content. But what is sensationalism? It's the use of exciting or shocking stories or language at the expense of accuracy. So it's when people are like, did you know that the world is gonna end tomorrow? And it's like not even rooted in any truth, but it gets people anxious and riled up or even excited, and that's essentially what sensationalism is, and that is unfortunately what we are experiencing right now. And they do all of that just to provoke public interest. It doesn't matter if what they are creating is causing more harm than good, as long as they get engagement. So with that being said, you might be wondering, okay, what does this mean for Canada's political future? And I honestly think that overall, Trump's win in the US is a reminder of how American politics can affect us, whether we like it or not. With more Canadians starting to lean towards conservative messages, we might be seeing the beginning of a shift over here as well. And unfortunately, if we're not careful, we might find ourselves in a political climate that's even more polarized than the US. Because keep in mind, we got even more parties. And it is up to us to stay informed. You have to stay critical of what you see online. Make sure that you're fact checking. Make sure you're doing your own research. Ask questions. And most importantly, make sure that you're supporting Canadian values. It might be funny to be like, oh, I support Trump. You're not American. Mind your business. Figure out ways that you can support Canadian politics, learn more about it, and get the ball rolling from there. We shouldn't just be echoing trends of what's going on in the States. But yeah, that is my explanation of how the recent Trump win affects us as Canadians. I really do hope that my breakdown was useful. If you guys have any other questions or things that you want me to explain about Canada in general or Canadian politics, please let me know, because I am just always trying to learn. But yes, with that being said, thank you guys so much for watching my video. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Let's just keep talking about how we can make things better here in Canada and stay focused on Canadian issues. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Bye!